Columbian exchange is a process of transferring plants, animals, microbes, and people across the Atlantic and back. From Europe to Africa, from Africa to the Americas, and from the Americas back to Europe. A perfect example of this would be the crops that were taken from the Caribbean to Europe, such as tomatoes, corns, vanilla, peppers, avocado, pumpkins, turkeys, pineapples, and so on and so on and so on. Now, on a side note, I would like to point out that all of the crops that Columbus decided to steal were all calorically dense. And for my people back at home who don't understand what that means, allow me to explain. If I grew a field of corn and potatoes instead of onions or wheat, which was something that was typically grown in Europe, I would be able to feed 4 times as many people with a field of potatoes and corn due to them being all calorically dense. So what does this mean exactly? Well, it's pretty simple. The food that the Europeans now had access to spiked their population growth. Crops such as sugar, coffee, and grapes for wine were some of the many things that were brought to the Caribbean. Growing sugar in the Caribbean was so lucrative that the Spaniards actually had all of their own food imported so they could focus on planting crops specifically in that area. Now, the crops that were grown in the new colonies, such as sugarcane, tobacco, and cotton, were all labor intensive, and because there was not enough settlers to cultivate all of the new land or successfully meet the massive demand for labor, the Europeans looked to Africa for their new source of slavery. And where do you think they got the idea to put African people in chains, you might ask? They got the idea from none other than Bartolome de la Casa, the same who wrote about the atrocities that Columbus committed a few years earlier. Now, because the Arawak and Taino had just about died out and there was no one left to work the plantation for the Europeans, La Casa considered another strategy for the king and queen. La Casa began to advocate for the importation of African slaves to compensate for the decreasing Arawak population. According to La Casa, if alternate laborers were not brought in, the Indians would soon be wiped out and the plantations would not be able to exist.